Chapter 29, The Triumph of the Right. At the beginning of the 1970s, many Americans began to worry they had entered an age of limits, an era in which Americans would have to learn to live with increasingly constricted expectations. By the end of the decade, however, another response was gaining strength, one that combined a conservative retreat from some of the heady liberal visions of the 1960s and reinforced a commitment to the idea of economic growth, international power, and American virtue. America endured through the stewardship presidency of Gerald Ford and the challenges of the Jimmy Carter era, but it was not until the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980, a full 7 years after Nixon's resignation, that America had finally found sure footing again. The New Right, the so-called New Right, had been rising in American politics ever since their disastrous showing in the 1964 presidential election. Barry Goldwater had suffered a shattering Republican defeat in that election, but out of that political disaster, enthusiastic conservatives rebuilt their political organizing and fundraising systems. By the late 1970s, they had right-wing think tanks, lobbyists, foundations, and colleges to draw upon, not to mention millions of rapt evangelical television viewers and conservative talk radio listeners. This movement found its voice in an influencer in Ronald Reagan, a moderately successful Hollywood actor, former liberal, who came to conservatism later in life. Reagan had delivered a memorable television speech on behalf of Goldwater in 1964, and he worked hard to seize the symbolic leadership, the ideological leadership of the conservative wing of the Republican Party in the years that followed. He nearly unseated President Ford in the 1976 Republican primaries, and he supported the tax revolt in American politics from the governor's chair in California. Rather than attacking popular social programs, the Citizens' Tax Revolt separated the issue of taxation from that of what the issue of what taxes actually supported, arguing that much of the money raised by government was ultimately wasted. As the economy grew weaker and the tax burden grew relatively heavier, Americans were increasingly drawn to the conservative vision that the New Right offered, lower taxes. In the election of 1980, Republicans rallied behind a sharp critic of the excesses of the federal government, a man who championed a restoration of American strength and pride in the world. Ronald Reagan beat the sitting president, Jimmy Carter, handily. The Republicans took the Senate for the first time in nearly 30 years. The American hostages being held in Tehran were released on the day of Reagan's inauguration. And President Reagan set about reshaping the federal government from the inside out. The coalition that supported Reagan during his 8 years in office, 2 terms, included wealthy capitalists who sought unfettered capitalism, among others, and neoconservatives, a new group who sponsored a deliberate escalation of the Cold War with the Soviet Union. It is a testament to Reagan's political skills and personal charm that he was able to balance the uneasy alliance between anti-government conservatives, Christian evangelicals, and the powerful ideological interest groups that backed him. He was the oldest man ever to serve as president at the time, but even an assassination attempt during his first year failed to slow him down. His carefully honed public image led some Democrats to refer to him as the Teflon president, like a Teflon pan. Nothing stuck to him. He effectively distanced himself from the pressures of the office and trusted advisors and administrators to implement his vision of conservative government. This helped shield him from criticism and scandal, including the $500 million savings and loan industry debacle and the Iran-Contra affair, which saw money being funneled from illegal weapons sales to the government of Iran back to revolutionaries in Nicaragua. Part of that vision was a reimagining of the American economy, which had long operated under Keynesian ideas or notions about the government's role in the economy and the important role that government has to play. Reagan's famous experiment with supply-side economics, sometimes called Reaganomics, operated on the assumption that the woes of the American economy were in fact a large part as a result of excessive taxation on wealthy individuals and businesses, which wasted money at the expense of private investment, which is the true source of economic progress. Reagan pushed through bold reforms that lowered income tax rates precipitously, while his appointees to federal office also helped to implement a gradual policy of deregulation, an attempt to dismantle a lot of the New Deal across federal departments. And the United States economy, in response, quickly shook off its decade-long malaise. Though he'd promised to balance the federal budget like a good conservative, Reagan presided over a record budget deficits due in part to increases in the cost of entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare, but mostly due to his own record of tax cutting and increased military spending. Though the president said he supported a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, the Reagan administration added much more to the federal deficit than its cuts in domestic spending removed. And Congress regrettably never approved that amendment, but they still could. Other initiatives and efforts have had more staying power and more of a legacy. In 1986, Reagan triumphantly signed into law the Immigration Reform and Control Act. Immigration Reform and Control Act, the last serious attempt at immigration reform. And he used the occasion to speak to the promise of America's immigrants in a famous speech from the Statue of Liberty. Nearly 3 million undocumented workers received legal status as a result of the law. In 1987, after appointing numerous icons to the Supreme Court, including Justice Scalia, Kennedy, and O'Connor, Reagan nominated Robert Bork, famously, to fill a vacancy on the Supreme Court. Bork, a federal judge and former Yale University law professor, had opposed the Civil Rights Act, affirmative action, and the Roe v. Wade decision. After acrimonious confirmation hearings, the Senate rejected Bork's nomination by a vote of 58 to 42, touching off an era that we continue to live with this day of highly contested Supreme Court nominations. On the global stage, Reagan continually referred to the Soviet Empire, the Soviet regime, as the evil empire, right? And he proposed ambitious military spending in the form of his Strategic Defense Initiative, or what he called Star Wars. Must have been a lover of the films. And it was designed specifically to shield the United States from any and all incoming nuclear missile attacks. Though the administration bowed to political pressure by agreeing to limited arms control negotiations, the administration created a policy known as the Reagan Doctrine, a strategy designed to resist communism and anti-Americanism in the Third World. Reagan Doctrine. Reagan sent soldiers and money to weaken and overturn anti-American governments in tense corners of the globe, but largely shied away from serious warfare, even as radical terrorists increasingly turned to bombing American targets and soldiers abroad. Reagan's 1984 campaign was a celebration of the revival of America's fortunes and spirits under his Morning in America vision and leadership. Inflation was down. Things were getting better, people felt like. He beat Walter Mondale and his surprise vice presidential nominee, Geraldine Ferraro, with a nearly 60% of the popular vote. He surprised everyone in that election in 80, and a lot of people were very worried he was going to roll back all of the Great Society programs. He did roll back some of it or deregulate some of it, but in 1984, he got a serious mandate in a way we haven't seen since. The Soviet Union, now under the leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev and his glasnost and perestroika initiatives, began to dismantle and reform the rigid Soviet Union beginning in 1985. Severe economic problems in Russia convinced Gorbachev to introduce elements of capitalism into the Soviet economy and to reduce the Soviet presence in Eastern Europe, resulting in the overthrow of numerous communist governments democratically and the impromptu fall of the Berlin Wall, the concrete barrier that had been hastily erected by the Soviets, which had separated communist East Germany and capitalist West Germany since the end of World War II. Fall of the wall. In 1991, communism began to collapse within the Soviet Union itself. Republics of the Soviet Union began to declare their independence from the Union. The Soviet government was powerless to stop the fragmentation. The last years of the Reagan administration coincided with the first years of the Gorbachev regime, and the efforts of the two leaders helped transform the world's superpowers at a critical time in human history. Capitalism and the American way of life, which had been shaken repeatedly across the 60s and 70s, had in fact outlasted the threat of global communism.